Welcome. My name is Dean. My name is Jeff Cox, Dean's oldest son. Thank you for coming to celebrate, honor, and pay tribute to the life of my dear dad, Dean Jeffrey Cox, whose spirit departed us on July 7th. It is truly inspiring to see so many family members, friends, colleagues, and peers here today whose lives he touched and left a lasting imprint on. I want to thank those who have traveled far to be with us here today. And on behalf of the entire family, we sincerely appreciate your thoughts and prayers. Your overwhelming support these past days has been so comforting. We will begin the service with an opening prayer by fellow Commissioner and Stake President Gil Almquist, followed by a vocal duet by BJ and Rachel Cox, accompanied by Carol Terry.
Our beloved Father in heaven, we gather this day to celebrate the life of our beloved friend, colleague, father, son, grandfather, and honored husband. We have great appreciation to thee for the privilege it has been to associate with him on so many levels. Truly, he has touched our hearts. Thou hast picked a favorite son to guide and direct in so many ways the family, government, and personal affairs of a place he loved and people he loved. We are grateful that he is flying high again because of his passion to be close to thee in faith. We are sincerely thankful to Thee, Father, for the messages of the last days, warm wishes from friends, family, neighbors, but especially Dean's wish back to us that the heavens would open and water this land, as he symbolically gave water to so many. We appreciate the way that he lived his life, studious, patient, friendly, always explaining the laws of heaven, the laws of earth, and the laws of man to perfection. Protect his family, give them safety, warm memories. Protect and make the veil thin for Lorene as she honors and remembers her close and almost inseparable connection to Dean. We thank Thee for the beauty of our area, for Thy care for all of us, for the nurturing spirit that Thou hast given to the Cox family. We are grateful to Father for Thy Son, his sacrifice, atonement, and resurrection, which we look forward to when we do meet each other and our dear friend Dean again. Thank Thee for this and Thy beloved Son, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pray you be our eyes and watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe.
La luce che tu dai
I pray we'll find your
nel
light
cuore resterà
and hold it in our heart.
a ricordarci che
When stars come out each night,
l'eterna stella sei nella mia preghiera.
let this be our prayer.
Quanta fede c'è
When shadows fill our day,
lead us to a place,
guide us with your grace.
give us faith so we'll be safe. Son Torniamo un mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia e di speranza. Ognuno diala, man suo vicino, simbolo di pace, di fraternità. La forza che ci dai,
We ask that life be kind
il desiderio che
and watch us from above.
ognuno trovi amor
We hope each soul will find
intorno dentro sé.
another soul to love.
Let this be our
Prayer, let this be our prayer.
just like every child.
Just like every child
Need to find a place. Guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe. E la fede che hai acceso in noi. Sento che ci
Thank you. That was so beautiful. Next, we will hear from my brother Ed Cox, who will be delivering the eulogy, followed by remarks from my dad's brother Bob Cox, and then myself.
You have to bear with me a little bit on this one. I'm here today to speak for the memory of my father, Dean Jeffrey Cox. Given the near impossible task to speak for his history, his character, and his legacy in just a few moments, to offer a glimpse of the man who did so much for so many. Everyone in this room shares a piece of this history, a unique perspective of a man who wore many hats. Some knew him as a family man, a neighbor, a friend, mechanic, chemist, technician, computer whiz, pilot, and even hero. I knew him as all of that and more. He was my father, and he was everything to me. I was once told that who we are as a person is the summation of our experiences and choices, as if each choice or trait were small pieces to a larger, complex, and ultimately beautiful puzzle. My father's character was a beauty to behold. and truly a testament to the old adage that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. My father, the fifth of 7 children, was born on August 8th, 1954 in St. George, to 2 wonderful parents, Robert Edgar and Jean Gubler Cox. 2 wonderful parents who cared deeply for their children and shared a mutual commitment to raising them in a way that provided them the tools and guidance to take care of themselves and to stand on their own. But more importantly than that, they taught my pop the importance of serving others in good times and bad. This unshakable foundation instilled in youth, he continued to develop throughout the entirety of his life. In fact, I'd wager that most of us in this room, if not all, have been at one time or another on the receiving end of his love and assistance. This invaluable gift, bequeathed to my father from loving parents, still lives on today in the hearts of their progeny. The magnitude of this selfless contribution, enjoyed by my father, his siblings, and all who followed, is truly immeasurable. My father grew up in a small brick home about 1.5 blocks north of the St. George Boulevard. This house served as the first home purchased by Robert and Jean and was not far from their shop, Bob's Garage. This business located on Bluff Street was purchased by my grandfather shortly after the war. This humble establishment, run almost entirely by family, provided an ample income to support their needs. More than this, the family business served as an irreplaceable educational venue for my father and his siblings. Working at the shop under the heat of the St. George sun, he learned how to work hard, work smart, but most importantly, it taught my dad how to troubleshoot and fix darn near anything. He had such a broad and highly developed skill set that to this day still bewilders me. My pop could do anything. As my father grew into a young man, he quickly developed a passion for science, chemistry, physics, and more. In addition to his educational endeavors, my dad was known to be quite the prankster. Another unique characteristic he never grew out of. Just one more trait that I'd wager again that near everyone in this room at one time or another was likely to be on the receiving end of one of these loving pranks. Always quickly to be followed by that unique laugh we all love so much. As it turned out, being a student fascinated by chemistry, he quickly discovered that both science and tomfoolery could be a complementary combination. Worry not. A few of these stories, I have no doubt, will likely be given ample elaboration in some or maybe even all of the speeches that will follow mine. In addition to his fascination with understanding our world and the sciences, a passion he would never lose, he also enjoyed incredible ambitions. If there was something out there to be had and it interested my pop, he would have it. As a young man, he was fascinated by flight, and by the age of 18, he was well on his way to obtaining his pilot's license, a feat he accomplished in 6 months shortly after turning 19. He maintained his love for the skies his entire life. You'll probably hear a little bit more about that with my brother. It was around this same time in his life that he simultaneously began studying radio frequency as a medium for communication, even going so far as to receive a certificate as a licensed technician to repair commercial radio installations, all before the age of 18 and entirely self-taught. His interest in radio technologies and communication and an underlying willingness to serve others would eventually jumpstart his 30-year career as a public servant, but more on that later. My father graduated from Dixie High School in 1972 and shortly thereafter would serve a 2-year mission abroad in Germany. While overseas, he quickly mastered the German language, and even upon returning home, he would strive to maintain fluency for the rest of his life. After the conclusion of his mission and the long trip home, he quickly packed up and headed north to attend Brigham Young University, where he began his undergraduate studies in the field of chemistry. During this time at BYU in the fall of 1977, he would soon find soon find his life forever changed by crossing paths with the woman of his dreams, Lorene Levitt. One beautiful morning on campus in November, my mother had uncharacteristically skipped her religious studies class. And she was waiting outside for her sister to bring her the notes. It was at this moment that my father, who vaguely remembered my mom from high school, but remembered her name, said a quick, "Hello, Lorene," and continued on down the road to work. After this quick introduction, he didn't get far before having a brief moment of clarity. He stopped in his tracks and thought to himself, "I think I might have just encountered the woman that would be my wife." He quickly turned around and summoned up a bit of courage to run back and ask for her number. Fortunately for us all, this was one thing he didn't manage to blow up. A little chemistry joke for you. After only 3 dates, 1 plane ride, and a special date at Arby's, my mother and father were inseparable. In fact, only a few short months later, on March 6th, 1978, they were engaged. After a brief engagement, they tied the knot and were wed for time and eternity on May 12th, 1978, at the St. George Temple. Not long after they were married and moved back to southern Utah, he and his brother Robert, my uncle, decided to carry on the work of their father and form a partnership that would last a lifetime. Together, they purchased Bob's Garage and renamed it to Colorland Sales and Service. With the help of their wives and children, mind you, they owned and operated this successful small business for more than 30 years. They wasted no time in starting a family. Jeffrey would be born on April 10th in 1979, followed by Elisa on June 9th, 1980. Kristen on Christmas Day, 1982. Beyond any reasonable doubt, they of course saved the best for last, and I was born on October 26, 1986. My father shared a deep and unwavering commitment to his family and to his children. Later in life, when his children grew and started families of their own, that was when our dad, Grandpa, he reached the pinnacle of his life. He was a grandpa to 11 beautiful grandchildren, and his love for them held no limit. I learned so much from him. He was the type of guy who had an answer for everything, and not just an answer, a detailed explanation with footnotes and a chronological timeline of how it all happened. He was brilliant. He was wise. He was our dad. And we learned so very much. But he didn't do it alone. He couldn't have. And he'd tell you that himself. He had a wonderful wife who, through it all, she was his partner. They were a team. When there was a decision to be made, they made it together. And in our little county at the bottom of the state, the two of them would change their world, and they'd change it for the better. And I'm so proud of them both for all they have done. My father's first step into public service started unexpectedly as a product of his involvement with amateur radio communications in southern Utah. His involvement and mastery of the airwaves provided him the volunteer-based opportunity to maintain all of the Washington County Sheriff's radio and repeater network. This act of service would prove to be the first step in what became a near 30-year journey as a public servant of Washington County. Not long after volunteering, in 1991, he was recruited by the county commission to serve his community as the director of emergency services. Serving in this capacity over the years provided him with the unique management and leadership opportunities which made him the perfect candidate for the position of county administrator, a position he later earned and excelled at for over 10 years. During his years as the Director of Emergency Services and many years as a volunteer on the search and rescue team, he knew this country forwards and backwards, and he got me out of a jam a few times. One of them in particular I remember well. I got probably a couple friends in the audience that do too. One fateful day long ago when I was a teenager in high school, St. George was hit with incredible floods. As an invincible young man, I convinced my friends that we should purchase inflatable rafts and gear up for high adventure. We put a roll of duct tape and a cell phone in a Ziploc bag in case we got in a pickle, and after about 10 miles of near constant stupidity, and me at the lead, we floated down the floodwaters to what appeared to be the mouth of the gorge. In a panic, and with our rafts being torn to pieces in the escalating current, we managed to get to shore by the skin of our teeth. We salvaged what was left of the raft and grabbed a cell phone and made duct tape shoes, which my mother still has, for our feet and started the long walk back in the summer heat. But we didn't get far before realizing we needed to utilize the nuclear option here. I needed to call my dad. And I gave him important landmarks like red dirt and steep cliffs, so he could really narrow it down for us. My father utilized this near useless information and set out to find us. He headed straight for the desert where he believed would be, and 30 minutes later, after we'd walked near a mile in the scorching heat with duct tape shoes and using a deflated raft for shade, we saw in the distance a truck heading our way, and he had actually found us in the middle of nowhere, walking along a dirt road, sunburnt and thirsty, and we were dumbfounded that he actually found us. I remember telling my friends I guess that's why they liked him so much on the search and rescue team. He was a phenomenal asset for search and rescue and a natural fit to run Washington County's emergency operations. Two positions that positioned him well to run the county as a frugal, pragmatic administrator. But even with all this, his proudest and crowning achievement of his professional life was the opportunity to serve his community as an elected commissioner of Washington County, a position of which he was entrusted from 2016 to the time of his passing, and a position he never stopped working for without regard to the devastating impacts of cancer and its difficult treatment. He devoted his life to his family, his community, and his county. He never gave up on anything. He was in immense pain, and he chose to keep moving forward, and he did it for all of us. He is the strongest man I've ever known. But how will we remember his legacy? I'd like to remember him for his innate passion for service. He leveraged his many talents in an unending pursuit to serve his community. This stalwart devotion to family and friends was seen and felt by all who knew him, and even perhaps by many who didn't. I will remember him as a man who gave his all, a man who never gave up on his dreams or stopped helping his family and friends. But most of all, I will remember him as my father, the man who was everything to me. Love you, Pop.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, family, for this privilege and opportunity to share with you some of the memories and experiences that I've had with my brother. There is not enough time today to share all of those, nor would we want to. Some things should just lay buried. But Lorene and family, thank you so much for this great privilege and honor to remember and honor my brother, our brother, and his life. With my assignment here today, I sublet part of it and asked each of my siblings to share with me a story or a memory that they have of our brother. And I'd like to share those with you before I get into the ones that I have. But Janice relates a story of how Dean received his name. And as been stated, Dean came into the Cox family on August 8th, 1954. Our father had been forced to reduce his ability to work because of debilitating back problems and surgery. Our family finances were precarious at best. Dad was serving at the time as bishop of our ward, and he had a young returned missionary in the ward who was serving in the armed services in Korea at the time. His name was Dean Martinson. He sent a letter to our parents in which he told them that it had been made known unto him that Mom and Dad were in need of some financial help. He enclosed his monthly salary in response to that divine direction. Mom and Dad gave their new son, in honor of Dean Martinson, the name of Dean. Both of these Deans have been blessed through that gift of generosity to grow up strong with traits of integrity and hard work, the ability to sacrifice for a higher cause, a deep love of Dixie, and with a beacon of visionary service to his fellow men. My sister Eileen shares a story and a memory which illustrates his ability to feel and empathize with the emotions of others and to join with them to overcome the daily challenges of life. We as a family enjoyed the love and companionship of a trusty little dog. His name was Scotty. Scotty loved to chase the noisy trucks up the old Highway 91, now known as Bluff Street. And one morning, just as we were getting on the school bus, Scotty took after one of these noisy trucks. His timing was off, and to our absolute horror, that truck ran over our dog. Just as the bus was pulling away, this little dog got up and staggered to the side of the road. That was a pretty hard memory for us to reflect upon during the course of that day. When we got home, we found that Dad and Mom had taken that dog to the vet. And when he saw Scott, Dean said, "I prayed all day for Scott. I didn't pray out loud, I just prayed in my brain." Charlene relates a story about Dean, who was true to his charge of our parents. He was asked to pick Charlene up after school and get her home safely. She says, "I was just in the first grade. One particular time he caught a couple of girls bullying me. He promptly ended that by punching one of the girls, after which he and my mother were invited to the principal's office." I'm sure Dean said, "I was just taking care of Charlene." Dean has always been a very inquisitive guy. He became a ham radio operator at a very young age. He had to know how things worked, and if he had to tear them apart and reassemble it, that's what happened. Andy relates a story that when Dean was about 18, he decided to get his pilot's license. And soon after, he invited Andy to go for a ride with him. Andy said, somewhat reluctantly, knowing of Dean's proclivities for danger, I agreed. At the time, I had a fishing hat that I wore just about everywhere, including that day on the plane ride with Dean. It was a balmy late spring or summer day when the ride took place, and as I remember, Dean circling town while continuously gaining altitude. Dean's goal was to take me so high in the airplane that the outside temperature would read 32 degrees. And he said, I believe we made it to about 13,000 feet when we reached our goal. Then Dean said, do you want to see the radio's microphone float? The radio had a handheld mic which rested on the console between the two. And reluctantly, Andy said yes. So Dean pushed the yoke in, and down went the plane into a steep dive. And sure enough, the radio's microphone did leave its resting place. After a short time, that microphone floated. And then he said we resumed a more horizontal position in the airplane, and then I grabbed my fishing hat and promptly vomited into it. I'm sure Andy would still wear that hat today if he hadn't have done that. It was inseparable. Andy and that hat were one. Now I'd like to tell you a couple of stories that are my personal stories and memories of Dean. And the first is one that I have to say, I guess I take the credit for Dean's curiosity and interest and desire to see things go bang. Those of you that have been in the shop will remember that back after we purchased, before we purchased the shop, Dad did a lot of work on farm equipment. And it was very hot in there in the summer. And if you can picture my father and one of his good customers, who also happened to be his cousin, Harold Cox, were working on removing a shaft out of a bearing that had seized up. And my dad had this great big blue press. I mean, it was higher than all of us, taller. And he had that set up to where he was down watching the progress of that shaft being pushed through that bearing. And it was making terrible noises, screeching and bouncing. And I had just recently returned from a church trip with my young men's quorum, and we'd gone to Mexico. I had purchased a fairly good quantity of firecrackers. And I said to Dean, this is one of those moments. And so I said, I'm going to hold the firecracker in my hand. You're going to light it. And then I'm going to huck it over under Dad. It worked so good. Both of those guys, my dad and Harold, came off of the ground about 6 inches. Looking around to see if they were all right. And then they spied Dean and I over there just laughing. And we were promptly banished to the corn patch. And we were told that if there was a weed left in it, there would be hell to pay. And we believed him. So I'll take credit for Dean's enjoyment with making things blow up. But Dean, has been said, loved chemistry. And I really think the reason he loved it so well is because he learned how to make things that went bang. And he learned how really, really well. In fact, he made and I don't know exactly if I have the name right, but it was a substance called, I'm going to call it potassium chloride. And it was a liquid. And if you sprinkled it out, it would dry, and then people walked on it, and it would explode. And it was the funniest thing to watch the dance steps that occurred as people walked over. I remember Kyle Howes, our friend, I believe it blew his shoe off his foot. So those are wonderful experiences and terrific memories. That happened while Dean was a lot younger. But just so you understand, that didn't end when he got older. Dean and I bought a cabin together, and then I bought a cabin next to our cabin. And we had a terrible problem. We have a terrible problem up on the mountain with gophers and moles. We trapped them, we poisoned them. We did everything that we could to rid our yards of those pests. They ate our gardens. And I think one day, Dean had a revelation of sorts. And so he began the manufacture, this is not too long ago, of really good firecrackers. And I remember him telling me, I wait for the advertisements to come because they have thicker paper and I can roll them tighter. And he would make firecrackers that were, kind of big. And we would go out and find those fresh digs. We would carefully excavate them, insert that explosive charge down in, and then we'd pack it so that all of the concussion stayed in the ground. And it mostly worked, but you never wanted to walk outdoors at night. You might fall into a crater. And there were funny designs in the yards. There were these green spots all over the yards. That was where the enhanced explosive devices were set. Fertilizer and explosives, they really go bang. And the grass was always greener because all of the fertilizer didn't explode. Okay, well, I'm going to go back, and I've got to hurry. As has been said, in 1980, Dean and I were able to purchase our father's business. And we started out with a business and nothing else. We were so poor, it was unbelievable. We couldn't even afford to buy a barrel of oil. But we made it work, and we just kept our noses to the grindstone. We had a situation where we had done some work. It was a warranty claim for a generator, and we had to put a new short block in it. I prepared the warranty form and submitted it. We were really looking forward to the $400 or $500 that was going to come back to us from doing that work. And about 6 weeks after that, we received a letter from Briggs & Stratton, and in it it said, "We're sorry to inform you, but the claim did not meet our standard. Therefore, we have modified it and corrected it to meet our standard." And attached to that letter was a check to reimburse us for our work. We read the letter and thought, well, here we go again. They've put it to us again. And then we looked at the check a little closer, and the check was made out in the amount of $49,450. And I said, okay, now look, they said it didn't meet our standard. They modified it. I'm good. Dean said, well, we could sure use that money and put it to work for us. But when they find their heir, and they will, we'll have to return that money. And if we got it tied up in something, it's going to be really difficult to send it back to them. So if any of you have ever got a letter from Dean, I mean, there's all the facts, and they are outlined and double-checked, and there's no mistake. He wrote that letter and sent it to them. And we thought, well, what do we do? So we decided we would go down and deposit that money into a separate account and wait for further instructions. 1 year later, we received a letter back thanking us for being so honest and asking for the return of the overpayment. They indicated at that time that they would have never caught their heir had we not said something. The money was returned, and we each got a special gift from Briggs & Stratton. Dean got the retirement watch, and I got the retirement pen, and we went to work the next day. But in short, I think Dean was my very best friend. He was my partner. We went on trips together. We vacationed together as families. We purchased boats together. We bought cabins together. We ran water lines together. We made solar systems. And in general, we worked and recreated and traveled and truly enjoyed each other. Now, these experiences that I've shared are but a small sampling of the memories that we have together as a family with Dean. The common thing between them is that Dean was and is an exceptional brother, husband, father, friend, and loyal servant to all. I ask each one of us here today to continue his legacy by living and by improving ourselves, by being honest, loyal, fierce in defending each other, and being gentle and forgiving. Remember with me that the master teacher asked that we love him with all our might, and then to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Dean is the epitome of all of these traits. He's in a place now where the mysteries of the universe can be explored, learned, and put into practice on a daily basis. Dean, we love you, and we can hardly wait till we meet again. Thank you.
I probably need to apologize in advance. I have some reoccurring memories that you've already heard, so bear with me. To say I'll miss my dad is an understatement. Dad had a magnetic personality, and he was gifted with so many talents, qualities, and accomplishments that it's difficult to express for me who he was in so few words. I couldn't have asked for a better father, and I'm so proud to be his son. Most of my early memories of Dad are from working at Colorland Sales and Service, which we referred to as the shop. Dad was determined his kids would be instilled with a strong work ethic and an education. When I was in 6th grade, Dad had me work each morning at the shop to do numerous chores, and from there I would ride my bike to school and then return to finish my chores. It was during this year I distinctly remember him teaching me all sorts of various topics. He would lecture about mathematics, physics, chemistry, electronics, or whatever was relevant to the task at hand. The best lessons were those that ended in a loud explosion or an electrifying shock. Being the prankster that he was, he loved to catch people off guard, and you've heard this one already. He would concoct the small batch of contact explosives, ammonium triiodide, and wait for the unsuspecting passerby, or Kyle, to step on it. He also liked to test fully charged capacitors by asking someone to play catch. And I can tell you that is a shocking experience. He preached the mantra, if you're not early, you're late, and he expected me to perform like any other employee. In fact, he even fired me once. I can't remember why, but it was the best one-week vacation of my life. Dad could never quench his thirst for knowledge. He told me most people stop learning when they finish school, and he was intent on being a perpetual student. He amassed countless books covering a myriad of topics, some even written in German, and he enjoyed teaching others what he learned. He had a knack for engaging and explaining complex topics in simple terms. Many of these intellectual passions, as you've heard, have turned into hobbies, such as ham radio, computers, and aviation, to name a few. I think most everyone here knows Dad was a pilot. He flew for 48 years. I was thumbing through his logbook the other day, which is a treasured journal of distinct moments in his life. His first flight lesson was April 5th, 1973, when he was only 18 years old, and he obtained his license shortly thereafter, turning 19. His first few solo flights as a newly minted pilot included taking his brothers Bob and Andy up for flights, and his friends Lance and Denton. While attending BYU, he also used his license to impress his dates, one of which was my mom, who took her first flight with him on January 14th, 1978. As you've heard, they were married 4 months later on May 12th. I even discovered my first flight, dated August 31st, 1980, in which he remarked, "First family ride, Elisa, Jeff, Lorene, and me." I was 16 months old. Dad really enjoyed taking family and friends on new adventures, always noting the names of his passengers in his logbook. Some rides even inspired careers in aviation, which continue to this day to the next generation. He passed the flying bug on to me, of course. Some of my best memories are flying with him as a kid or meeting him somewhere for lunch, he in his plane and me in mine. In fact, the picture of the airplane in the program was taken by my wife, Tana, during one such excursion to Montrose. Being the joker that he was, Dad couldn't resist layering his airplane on top of some questionable backgrounds, like the one in the program, flying through the delicate arch, being refueled midair by an Air Force tanker, or buzzing the White House, to name a few, which he unabashedly posted on Facebook. Dad always planned for the future. He was a zealot when it came to personal finances, almost to a fault. During my childhood years, we rarely went on vacation or out to eat. If Dad ever cooked, we ate spaghetti or macaroni and cheese, and always with Oscar Mayer hot dogs. His drive for cost savings even extended to our bathroom habits, I'm embarrassed to say, from which he would insist no more than 2 sheets of toilet paper were necessary. Thank goodness he bought 2-ply. Any extra amount saved or earned went towards the mortgage, and he and my mom paid off their first home in only 5 years, an accomplishment he was so proud of. One of his favorite places was Kolob, as you've heard, where he and Bob owned a cabin. We would hike, fish, shoot, ride ATVs or snowmobiles, and work on the garden, which is one of Dad's favorite pastimes. He loved watching the corn grow. If he wasn't in St. George, he was probably on the mountain. It was his sanctuary, but he could never just relax. It wasn't in his DNA. Most centered around maintaining his off-grid power system, which included solar panels, wind turbine, a generator, batteries, all interconnected by an inverter. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the numerous cameras he installed, covering nearly every angle of the cabin. He loved checking the weather and watching the wildlife, especially the birds. But his favorite shots were of his friends who would pose in the driveway and wave hello. Dad appeared to have everything going for him. He had a wife whom he absolutely adored and a loving family. He thoroughly enjoyed his job at the county, and he had more friends than anyone I know. He had a passion for life, and it seemed nothing could slow him down. Then, on August 1st, 2019, Dad discovered he had terminal cancer. He remained as optimistic as one can, hoping to survive for at least 5 years, given some of the recent medical advances. He did everything the doctors asked. After his stem cell transplant, the cancer was even determined to be in stringent complete response, meaning his chances for longevity were good. We were filled with so much hope, and Dad was a fighter. For the most part, he carried a stoic face. He didn't want anyone to worry or to know how much physical pain or mental anguish he was in. He made work a priority and religiously attended his commission meetings, a distraction, but also a support network from those who took a sincere interest in his well-being. During his final years, Dad expressed so much gratitude, kindness, and patience to those around him. He was an amazing example of perseverance. As his health declined, I became his conduit for flying. We traveled to Lake Havasu, Page, Grand Junction, and not to mention several local flights. He even had the audacity during our flight to Page to break my ground speed record, and he couldn't help remind me occasionally who the fastest pilot was. I will never forget our last flight together on March 27th. Over some of the most beautiful scenery in southern Utah. Dad was in pain, but he found tranquil moments flying over Kolob, Zion, and Bryce Canyon. I'm gonna miss you, Dad. I'll miss our conversations, your stories and jokes, your wise fatherly counsel, and most of all, the firm hugs. I'm so honored to be your son and hope I can make you proud. And even though I can't physically see or hear you now, I will always feel your presence as I fly amongst the clouds. Next, I want to introduce Nicole Felshaw, who worked closely with Dad as a county administrator. As many of you know, Dad was planning to retire at the end of this month after his nearly 30 years of service. Nicole was working on a surprise farewell video for him, and we have invited her to come and play and introduce the video.
I'm humbled today as I stand before you to say a few words about Commissioner Dean Cox. He has touched all of our lives in some form or fashion and will leave an empty space for many of us in the community that could only be filled by Dean. When Dean's family asked me to say a few remarks, I didn't feel like I could do justice and find the right words to express what he truly means to me or the impact he has had on my life, but was honored nonetheless that they trusted me enough to be up here today, knowing I wear my heart on my sleeve and might not make it through this without tears, clearly. But here's hoping. I've cried enough over the last week and a half to not be able to produce too many today. I worked closely with Dean for 7 years in the commission office and eventually took his place as county administrator when he was elected as county commissioner. He has played an instrumental role in my life since I met him. He took me under his wing, taught me, trusted me, respected me, guided me, valued me, became a close friend, and one of my biggest advocates. His wealth of knowledge and the love he showed his family were at the top of my list of the many things I learned to admire about him. He was a family man. He shared stories and pictures with me about his amazing children and beautiful grandchildren. I knew immediately he was so proud of each one of them, and over the years, I recognized all the reasons why he loved them so much. Most of us knew without a doubt how much love he had for Washington County, but it didn't compare to how much love he had for his family. One of the sweetest moments for me was when I was fairly new at the county and his phone rang. He looked down, answered it, and said without the slightest hesitation and with a smile in his eye, "Hello, sweet pea." I knew at that moment he was smitten with his wife. He had the utmost respect for her, and she came absolutely first in his life. Those two have a love that is once in a lifetime. They complement each other in every way, are like two peas in a pod. She is the yin to his yang, inseparable beings, and I know that he will continue to watch out for her and protect her from the other side. Dean is the most valiant person I know. He worked tirelessly to fulfill his commitment as a commissioner and fought to the bitter end. The day before he passed away, he woke up determined to make it to commission meeting. Although he wasn't able to attend, he always showed that type of dedication. That's the kind of man he was as he served the residents of Washington County. When Dean announced his retirement date, I wanted to find a way to give back to him, to let him know how grateful I was to him and what he meant to me and to others. The original plan was to present a tribute video to Dean, along with other items recognizing his years of service, at his last commission meeting on July 20th. I was heartbroken not only to lose a dear friend too early in life, but also to realize that I had fallen short of him not being able to see this beautiful tribute I think he would have loved. So today, at the request of Dean's family, it is my pleasure to present this video tribute to honor Dean in celebration of his life. I hope that he has a front row seat and somehow knows what he meant to me and to others. Dean, this will have to do until we meet again, my sweet friend. Know that you are loved, respected by many, and your presence will be deeply missed.
All good things to say about Commissioner Cox.
He has always been a supporter and a friend to me throughout my whole career. In fact, during my very first election, he helped volunteer and helped me stuff envelopes and print stuff.
He's just been an incredible ally for me as a new elected official in helping me to be grounded and to help me along in the process of trying to staff and understand county organizations. And
has always been super supportive,
and making you feel like you're proud to be an employee of the county.
But Dean is always such a gentleman, so easy to work with, and I believe that the county has been the beneficiary of Dean and his talents and his personality for a long, long time.
Dean and I speak German, and so we'll be in a meeting and it'll be fun to just throw someone's name out that's inside the room with us and watch them perk up because they think we're talking about them, when in reality we're talking about something we experienced on our missions in Germany and the fun things that we remember.
We have this fun thing that whenever we pass each other or see each other, we always do this, hey, what watch are you wearing today? We kind of talk about watches. And the great thing about Dean is no matter how rushed or short on time he is, he always gives me a minute or two. And that's just the example and leadership that he has, that he's so personable and gives everyone the time.
I love how approachable he is. He has a great smile, great sense of humor.
He's always been so kind to me personally.
He has become my dear friend, someone I trust, someone that I lean on for institutional knowledge within the county and beyond.
His drive to get things done.
Great attitude, well balanced, works on difficult issues.
He has a wonderful mind, a way to think about things, process things, and sometimes I just feel like I'm learning from him and as we discuss things.
I told Dean this a long time ago. He's one of the smartest people I know. His mind is capable of so much, and so it's been a real pleasure for me to just get to know him and learn, be mentored by him on all the things that are going on in the county and in government.
And he doesn't forget anything. It just seems like, oh, I remember that. It was like 11 years ago, and he can give you the very specific details of a certain incident. It's just amazing to work with him.
I was very amazed at just the depth of knowledge he has about so many different subjects. And not only just he knew a lot of stuff, he was always continuing to learn. And it was really neat to have certain discussions about things that he would go out and study and learn, and then he'd come in and tell me about it. And so I was so impressed with his thirst for knowledge and to learn new things.
He's been able to take that life experience and really leverage it for the people of Washington County. And it's been a true honor to work with that man.
One of the things I appreciate more about Dean than anything is just the day-to-day. If you wanted to bounce an idea off from him or get his thoughts on something, he was there. He had a lot of good wisdom and a lot of political savvy. He really helped me get my feet on the ground. My learning curve was about like that, so it was good to have him there.
He has always been willing to listen, discuss issues, and has shown me personally some great kindness in the past, and I will always appreciate that.
He's a good man. He's a terrific man. You can see that he's well loved and well respected, and he earns that.
He's always had an open door that we can go in and talk, or on the phone, or calling him at 2 o'clock in the morning when we have something going on. He's always been very accessible and very much how can I help kind of attitude.
It's been nice having him on the county commission to where you know somebody if you call them at night. If you call them in the middle of the night when you've got a fire, a disaster, a flood, you know that he'll be there for you. You know he'll have the resources of the county there for you.
Really helped me understand what it means, what community means. The most important thing I'd say was Dean was a very community person and really set an example for me with his leadership.
I think one of Dean's greatest attributes is no matter what the situation, Dean's always Dean. Whether we're battling a wildfire or we're dealing with a political fire.
We really need to look at the entire career that Dean had and the great things he did here.
Over emergency management for the county, and then the administrator of the county, and then of course as a commissioner.
It's evident that he cares deeply about this community, as evidenced by the service that he's given.
I've seen him tackle very complex issues where citizens have competing interests and do it in a way that everybody is satisfied with the outcome and walks away happy, which is an incredible skill. He's one of the very best elected officials I've worked with over my 32 years of doing this.
I don't know that people realize all the behind-the-scenes work that Commissioner Cox has done.
We wondered when Dean became a commissioner what would change.
because he'd been the county administrator. He'd been doing a ton to run the county. But one thing that fundamentally changed was how we approached the Northern Corridor. We would not have a Northern Corridor if not for Dean.
I'm especially grateful for your instrumental work in getting the Northern Corridor approved, a project that Washington County, the state of Utah, and the Utah delegation had been trying to accomplish for decades.
It was my honor to sit with you as you almost single-handedly brought together a group of diverse stakeholders from federal, state, and local levels to find a path forward.
I was blown away by how thoughtful he was about how to approach that procedurally, to be sensitive to all of the points of view out there, and to try and accommodate residents of the county whom it's obvious that he loves.
I listened to him when he was testifying in front of Congress regarding the Northern Corridor, and it was the most amazing thing to just listen to him. It was second nature to him. And I thought to myself, what an incredible asset this county has. I don't think that the people of the county truly understood what a great man they have working for them.
He came into a project that he'd been working on for 3 years, but looked at it through a different lens and fundamentally improved how we were going about doing it.
It needed someone at the county, at the local level, who could bring everyone together, who could listen and respect the different voices, because this was not easy. Dean Cox is the reason that all came together the way it did.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone who could bring a group of people that were vastly different with different priorities and be able to ask questions and bring those priorities into focus and then develop programs that would benefit not just Washington County, but all of the counties.
Dean is excellent at helping to guide processes of important efforts in our county. And Dean is the statesman. He's the glue that holds it together.
Anytime you want to talk about what's happened in this county, Dean can tell you step by step how everything transpired. He's worked on, as an emergency manager, he's worked on multiple disasters, earthquakes, floods, helped with developing mitigation projects throughout the county that have saved thousands and thousands and millions of dollars worth of damage. The repeater systems that we use in Washington County in order for our public safety people to talk for years were the result of his work, because he was a ham radio operator and he understood radio technology.
Now me being in that emergency management spot where Dean was before, it's a great thing for me because he laid all of that groundwork for me and for our office. So we've benefited greatly from that.
I love hearing Dean's stories about growing up here in St. George. They're very entertaining.
I mean, he knows Washington County probably better than anybody. He has flown over Washington County because he's a pilot. He's hiked up and down the mountains in his role as involved with emergency services in the sheriff's office. He's been to the top of the highest peaks where the radios are, his place up in Kolob, all the way to the bottom of the desert throughout the entire county.
Been a big support of me and of Springdale, and I've really appreciated that.
As I run the library, a lot of the questions he has for me and the directions he has for me is focused on how is that going to impact the patron.
Dean has been a big supporter of advancing world-class healthcare here close to home in Washington County, and we're grateful for that support.
I've always felt support from Dean, and likewise I hope he's felt support from me.
He was always open to what the university wants to accomplish, just genuinely interested in making the county better, but every entity of the county.
Being able to interact with him at Tuacahn, and he comes out and enjoys the shows and is always so supportive. He's also a contributor. He doesn't just buy tickets, he contributes of his own means.
Commissioner Cox has been just tremendously supportive of our national parks and our public lands. And
I remember New Harmony, the fire at New Harmony, that it was, really a really scary fire, and when it started making the run that it made, how close it came to being a true disaster. But I remember Dean was right in the middle of it. hours and hours and hours, and I just remember how much I felt that everything was under control, even when it wasn't.
We got to know each other in the fire of a Joint Information Center when the flood happened in 2010. And that's when I really saw the love Dean had for this community. Lots of water was coming from everywhere. And we had just recently received training on how to be a Joint Information Center. We had never done one before in the county. That was our first event. He was so caring for Washington County during those floods, but has a central core of stability, knew in his center that in order for the county to function, he was the county administrator at the time, the coordination factor had to be as effective and efficient as possible. Kept his head, expressed concern for those who were losing properties and lives were at risk. You could really see that at the core of Dean was a sincere love for the people of Washington County.
We've done so many different trips with snowmobiling, spending time. I mean, we used to have the best discussions about county work and stuff when he would take me up in his plane.
Then he'd taken me out on the Arizona Strip several times to, after we've had some storms out there, to check and see if we'd had any water, got any water in our ponds for our cattle. And he wasn't very good at finding water. Most of the time they were all dry still, but it was a nice experience. Another trip we went to Blanding for a meeting, and we drove over and we came through Keonta. We stopped there for something to eat. We came out that area is not covered very good by GPS, and so we missed our turn. And instead of going up through the reservation on up into Keonta, we took a side trip through Colorado. So we gave him a hard time about that for a while.
We took a couple of road trips that maybe Dean's GPS got us off into the outer regions where it didn't show roads on the map, but we knew we were kind of in the right area, so we were able to get back out very quickly and easily. Would have looked bad if the search and rescue would have had to come in and rescue us while Dean was there. So,
in some cases in government, people have an agenda. I think that Dean always tried to make the best decision for Washington County. I don't think he had a personal agenda on what he was trying to accomplish, but would hope to further Washington County along.
It was never about Dean. It was never about, putting someone in a better position or anything else. Everything was about what's best for our community and our county.
And his legacy will continue.
My wife, Joan, wanted to make sure that I acknowledged Lorraine and told her how much we appreciated not just Dean, but the Coxes.
I know that his family is still number one, even though he has broad arms that have taken in a lot of people. But a shout out to his family for sure, and especially Lorraine.
I could always tell when she was calling the phone because he would immediately stop anything and he would answer the phone. He'd always say, "Hi dear," or "Hi sweetheart, how you're doing?" And seeing their relationship was just always very endearing, how much they loved and cared for each other.
I always tell Dean that the best decision he ever made was to marry my cousin. That's one thing I can tell him and he'll never argue with me on. So
my first impression of those two were, boy, these are good people. Dean and Lorraine were involved, they were friendly, they were courteous, respectful, and they were just so helpful, but they were such good community servants.
He and Lorraine are just good, top quality people, and I can't say enough about them.
He often says to me, "Nicole, I sure appreciate you." And today is my day to go on record to say, "Dean, thank you for being my biggest advocate. I appreciate you more than you will ever know. You will always hold a special place in my heart, and I will miss working with you on a daily basis."
You've taught me a lot about optimism, about looking for the good and believing that ultimately we will reach a good place in the decisions we make and in our efforts to govern well.
I've always been proud of you, Commissioner Cox, for standing up and making the right choices.
I attribute a lot of the experiences that I've had to him, and I look forward to continuing using the things that he has taught me.
I want to say thank you for everything you taught me. Thank you for teaching me about county government and how it's supposed to work and what counties should and shouldn't do. Thank you for teaching me everything about Washington County and how to adjust the mirrors on my car. That's a lesson that I will take with me the rest of my life.
And you've been a model to me. You've been such a great example. More than that, you've been a great friend.
Your friendship is, I treasure. You and Maureen are the greatest people. Thank you for all you've done. And thank you for your friendship. It means a lot to me, and it's one that will last the eternities.
My friend, thank you for all that you've done for Washington County. You are to be commended for the 30 years of selfless and honorable service to the county. Your vision has helped shape what our community has become.
The courageous leadership and wealth of experience you've brought with each of your roles, it's going to be sorely missed. So thank you, Dean, for all that you've done for Washington County and for our state.
Dean, you honored our state with your commitment through 30 years of service to Washington County. Since your humble beginnings as an emergency services operator to a county administrator and then running for commission and winning a seat, you leave now with a much deserving recognition. Thank you for working tirelessly on so many important issues in southern Utah, including the Northern Corridor right-of-way and Habitat Conservation Plan renewal. Again, thank you for your service and thank you for being my friend.
Thanks, Nicole, for putting that together. I know my dad would have genuinely enjoyed it. Additional remarks will now be heard by my sisters, Elisa Edwards and Kristen Lotz.
There's not a good place on the program to be. After the video was kind of tough. I thought I was sandwiching my place in a great spot, but thanks, Nicole, for that beautiful tribute. We've all said it. My dad was a lot of things. He was a brother, a son, a loving husband, a loyal friend, a wonderful neighbor, an active volunteer, and a stalwart and valuable community leader. To me, my dad was a mentor. He spent his life teaching us paramount lessons such as the value of hard work and loyalty, the power of persistence, the significance of honesty and integrity, the benefits of always being prepared, and the beauty of empathy and compassion. My siblings and I were trained to work from a very young age. Aside from regular household chores, we were taught to work at Colorland, our family's business, and spent countless hours there growing up. As young children, we were responsible for tasks such as keeping the bathrooms clean, dusting equipment in the showroom, sweeping, mopping, and vacuuming. When those chores were done, if we still needed to keep busy, he would sit us on a little stool by his workbench. He handed us a number 10 can full of random nuts and bolts, and he would have us sort them. I cannot even tell you how monotonous that job was. I often wondered why he had so many random pieces to sort. Just a few years ago, he admitted to dumping all of our hard work back into the can at the end of the day, just so we'd have some busy work to do tomorrow. As we got older, he allowed us to participate in larger tasks such as shelving inventory, counting inventory, adding up labor for payroll, and even helping customers at the front counter. As we worked by his side, he always made it a point to teach us the principles of managing and operating business, including overhead costs, cost of inventory, and managing employees, lessons that would launch each of us into successful careers and adulthood. My dad was fiercely loyal, probably one of the most dependable and helpful people I have ever known. He was willing to help anyone, anywhere in their time of need. I remember one cold November day, he gave me the opportunity to practice dependability and loyalty. We were driving back from St. George from Kolob. We were in our old green 1974 Land Cruiser and just crossing over the Heavenly Valley, which our family refers to as Heavenly Valley. The Jeep sputtered and it just died right there in the middle of the valley, and it came to a complete stop. My dad turned back to us and said, We're gonna need to try and push start it and pop it back into gear. This didn't seem all too unusual to me because we'd push start go-karts and motorcycles in the past. And so trying to be helpful, I was the first to jump out of the back door, and I put my little hands on the back of the truck, and he drove away. He left me alone in the snow, and I just remember standing there thinking, at least I have my coat. It was only a few minutes before he came back towards me, and I'm pretty sure he laughed at me the whole way home. In our family, we don't give up. We work hard at things, and if they don't work out the first time, we keep trying. I remember being a newly permitted 15-year-old and learning how to drive. He was adamant about teaching us to be safe and defensive drivers. One morning at the cabin, he hollered down to me to get my shoes because we were going for a drive. I was excited and nervous at the same time. This particular day, he was teaching me how to drive stick shift and we were going to start and stop on some hills. We drove to the reservoir, and he made it a point to have me start and stop on the rolling hills along the way. Not too much gas, let off easy on the clutch. Soon we passed the reservoir, and we found we'd made our way to a pretty steep hill, and to my dismay, halfway up, he told me to stop. What, here? He explained to me that we were going to use the emergency brake to start and stop on this steep hill, and as you can imagine, my stomach was in knots. He yelled, more gas, you've got to give it more gas. And I'm pretty sure I killed that truck a dozen times before I finally got it moving again. I ran the 200-meter and 400-meter races at the track team for Pineview High School. I always had a tendency to slow down right before I crossed the finish line. I remember one day we had a track meet at Dixie College. I believe it was just a small local invitational. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and I didn't expect my parents to be there. But as I was rounding that final turn of the 400, I spotted my dad out of the corner of my eye, and he was yelling, go, go, go. I kept running, but I continued to hear his voice through the finish line. He had run alongside the track, the final 100 meters, supporting and praising me the entire way. That day was a personal best for me, and I've thought of this story and his example in my life many times. It was hard to find a story about honesty and integrity. There were so many that were taught in our home, but one in particular that came to mind was one that he purposely left a nickel on his bathroom floor as a test. Over the next few days, he gave us tasks that required us to go into his bathroom, and I'll never forget the day he called us all up to his room. He praised us for our honesty and told us that he had left that nickel there on purpose to see if one of us would pick it up over the week. It was only a nickel, but we had sure impressed him. Cell phones weren't really a thing when I learned how to drive. They existed, but they weren't practical for everyone. My dad was a ham radio operator, which gave him the ability to communicate with us from a vehicle, from the cabin, or from the shop. All of our vehicles were properly equipped with highly technical and very classy radio equipment. It was mandatory in our house to have a ham radio license before we could get our driver's license. This would ensure that he could communicate with his kids when we were out and about. I was pretty embarrassed about this, but I really wanted to drive. I studied and memorized as many of the test bank questions that I could, and I passed that test, and I was able to get my driver's license. I know it's been mentioned before, but my dad was a county emergency operations director for many, many years. He spent many sleepless nights helping with natural disasters in the area and working with the search and rescue. His stories were always so exciting for me to hear, but I learned at a young age that I never wanted to be the person that had to be rescued. He always taught us to carry emergency kits in our vehicles when we traveled, and to think twice about where we were going, and to make sure we always did our research. Sound advice that I've considered as I've ventured out with my own children or on long backpacking trips with my friends. This year marks my 20th year working in the healthcare industry. Over those 20 years, I've worked in many different capacities and with many different populations, including home health and hospice care, the cancer center, the emergency department, urgent care, and hospital medicine. I've earned certificates and multiple degrees in nursing, all of which should have adequately prepared me in dealing with my father's cancer diagnosis. I've come to realize that there isn't a textbook in the world that can cultivate that kind of learning. It was my dad, in his last 2 years of life, that taught me about empathy and compassion. His creed was to always leave things in better condition than he found them, and his goal and vision of success was to raise children that were more successful than he has been. This is a difficult challenge that we all aspire to achieve, fully aware of the effort it will require from us to measure up to the legacy that he leaves behind.
We're so honored by everyone who's come today. We've had so many people travel from far distances. We have so much family close, and we're so thankful for everyone that's here to celebrate our dad and his life. My dad would be so touched by everything that's taken place this weekend. My dad was a lot of things, a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think my favorite thing about this weekend has been hearing all of the memories and all of the stories about my dad. Having 10 minutes here today to try to convey who my dad was to me seems laughable and impossible, but I'm going to try. I have a few stories that I want to share that can illustrate who my dad was to me. My dad was a hard worker. I think we've covered that my dad worked. That's what he did. As a child, he did a great job involving us at work, not only at the shop, but everywhere else. We had a few rental properties, and I remember one weekend, we had an apartment in Cedar City, and the tenants had trashed this apartment. The apartment was furnished, so it was our job to go up as a family. We spent the night in the apartment. We gutted it, we pulled out the carpet, we pulled out the furniture. We were preparing to paint it and get it ready for the next tenants. We had brought the big trailer, the red trailer from the shop, to haul the furniture to the dump. We loaded and we loaded, and my mom told my dad, "You need to tie down that couch." And my dad said, "Hell, Lorena, it's fine." And so he didn't tie down the couch. We went to Taco Bell. We had lunch. And I had my permit, so I had ridden with my mom. I drove to Taco Bell in the car. And then on the way to the cabin to dump the furniture, my dad wanted me to ride with him. I hopped in the red truck, and we started on the way. We were on the freeway. And my dad kept saying, "Where's Mom? Mom should be right behind us. Where's Mom?" And I said, I don't know. I don't know where Mom is. We keep driving, and all of a sudden, the couch on the back of the trailer catches wind, and it just goes airborne, flies off the trailer, lands on the car behind us. We pull over. I'm panicking. I'm 15. This is like a disaster. My dad is just calm as ever. The people whose car it hit were freaking out. They were on vacation, and the lady was screaming at my dad, and I can still hear him, "Calm down, ma'am. I'm insured. This is no big deal. We'll get it taken care of." I'm terrified, so I run back down the freeway, and I just pushed the couch. It was a huge couch. All by myself, I had so much adrenaline. I just pushed it back to the truck, and the plastic feet on the bottom of it were completely melted off by the time I got it to the truck. And at this whole time, my dad is like, "Where is your mother?" And it was at that moment that I realized I had her car keys in my pocket. This is pre-cell phone. A bad day could not have gotten worse, and my dad was so mad. So we finally turned back around, got my mom her keys, tied down the couch, dumped all the stuff at the dump on the way to the cabin. We will always laugh. My mom would never say "I told you so" with her words, but she did with her face all the time. My dad, one of my greatest blessings, one of the things that my dad always taught me, is that I am capable. I'm a girl but I'm capable. I never felt like there was anything that I couldn't do. He didn't teach me any differently than my brothers, although Jeff and Ed will tell you that I cleaned the toilets at the shop. I never had to sharpen chains and repair mowers, but I was capable. He taught me how to drive a motorcycle. I think I was 12 because the rule was that my feet had to touch the ground, and that took a long time to happen. I know how to drive a stick shift. I know how to pull a trailer. I know how to drive in the snow, and I know how to change a tire. He always told me that if I wanted to do something, I had the brains and the guts to figure it out. In my adult life, I always felt a connection to my dad when I tackled tough jobs. I did all of the finished electrical in my basement by myself. I know how to fix sprinklers. I can change out a toilet. I have fixed my microwave several times. I've ripped apart my dishwasher and repaired it on my own. I've installed about 1 million smart light switches and thermostats and cameras and garage door sensors and everything else in my home. And I've never been afraid to tackle a project, and that's because of my dad. He had us work right alongside us and teach us. Everyone knows that one of my dad's greatest loves was Kolob. We've all heard about Kolob today. That's no surprise to anyone that's friends with him on Facebook. That's all he posts about, sometimes kids, mostly Kolob. I have several memories of my dad at the cabin as a young kid. One of my most memorable moments at the cabin was when I was about probably 14 years old. I think I was in 8th grade. This was at the time that Titanic had just come out. My friends and I had gone to the movie theater, I think, about 8 or 9 times and seen Titanic because we liked Leo. And we went to the cabin one weekend, and my dad let me bring my friend Megan with me. And he had just purchased a snowcat, and he was so proud of his snowcat because this is better than his snowmobile. It was really slow, but it had a cabin and it was heated. And the snowcat was new, and so it was a Saturday afternoon, and he told my friend Megan and I, "Come on, I'll take you guys for a ride in the snowcat." We said, "Okay." And I'm like, "This thing's cool. We don't need to put all our snow gear on because it's not a snowmobile." So I went out in my soccer shorts and a t-shirt and a pair of boots, and that's it. Same with Megan. And we start going for a ride in the snowcat. He goes down to the meadow below the cabin. We're cruising along when all of a sudden we just go bam, down in. And my dad said, "Oh shit, we're in the river." And I panicked. And I was like, "What?" And he said, "We're stuck." I'm like, "Dad, you said this can't get stuck. I'm not even dressed." And we sat there, and all I could think of was Titanic because the cold water was coming in through the door cracks of the snowcat, and I thought for sure I was going to die. Like, this is the moment that my dad was going to kill me with his shenanigans. The number of times that I've been stuck with him in mud, in snow, in cars, snowmobiles, snowcat, it doesn't matter, but I thought this one was it. He hiked back. He was the only one with snow clothes. He hiked back to the cabin, got a snowmobile, and came and rescued my friend Megan and I. We did not freeze to death, which was good news. One of my other favorite memories of Kolob is there was a snowstorm, and it was over a holiday weekend, I believe, and so there were a lot of people on the mountain. We hadn't gone up that weekend, but my dad knew a lot of people were snowed in their cabins. He had a friend with a helicopter, and so he took me along with him, but he called his friend and said, "Why don't you fly me up to the cabin?" So we got in a helicopter, and we flew up to the cabin. We landed in the front yard of the cabin. My dad got his snowcat, same snowcat, out of the garage, and he went to every cabin up in that community to make tracks so that they could get out on their snowmobiles so that they weren't all stuck in, and then we helicoptered home. My dad was frugal. He was extremely frugal, as you guys have heard, unless it had anything to do with electronics, computers, jewelry for my mom, or Rolex watches. But other than that, he was frugal. He worked very hard to teach us the value of $1. The lessons I learned from watching him have been invaluable as an adult. He was always tracking the amount of electricity we were using in our home growing up. If we left the light on in a bathroom or in our bedroom, he wouldn't get after us. He would go untwist the light bulb and take it. And then if we left the light on again, he would take another light bulb out. And you wouldn't notice until you were left down to one bulb or no bulbs. You'd get up at 6 in the morning to get ready for school, and there's no light in the bathroom, and then you had to go beg his forgiveness to get the light bulbs back. Washington County was the recipient of his frugalness. He was able to save county money, and they were able to fund the new Washington County Administration building without taking any bonds or loans, and that is something that he is so extremely proud of. And I'm not sure anyone else is dedicated enough to be able to do that. He was frugal enough that as children, we bought this story that he told us. I remember one year, he sat us all down and he said, "Kids, I know it's Christmas time. All the neighbors have lots of Christmas lights on their houses. If it's important to you guys, we can hang Christmas lights up. Or instead of paying for that electricity, I can take you guys all out for a really nice dinner at Red Lobster." We chose Red Lobster, and it wasn't until I was an adult with Christmas lights on my own house that I realized he just didn't want to hang the lights. It was his trick. Figured that out later. Buying a gift for my dad was tricky because he had everything. One year, I became obsessed with making my house a smart home. My dad had dabbled in smart lights, which I liked, and so I decided I wanted to do the same thing. I found a lot of joy in it, and I knew my dad would too, so for Father's Day, I gave him a SmartThings hub so that he could make his house even smarter. He started making every aspect of his home smart, and it still is, down to the most minute detail. If my mom leaves the chest freezer open in the storage room, a lamp in the family room comes on so they know the freezer's open. My dad always joked with me, and he said, "That $75 SmartThings hub was the most expensive gift you've ever given me. You paid $75, and I think I've spent $3,000 on accessories." He loved it. He loved the cabin. We heard about his firecrackers. I mistakenly referred to them as bombs a few times, and he says, "We don't say bombs in this age. They're firecrackers." I said, "Okay, Dad." He had a lab in his garage where he would make his firecrackers, and he would roll them up and pack them with whatever chemical, I don't even know whatever chemicals. And every once in a while, he would let me have a couple of them to take home and prank my own friends, but my mom tried to not let him. One year at the cabin, they grew pumpkins in the garden, and when the pumpkins were about done, he went and we put pumpkins, he stuck them on the fence posts around the cabin, and then he used his firecrackers, which, after hearing Uncle Bob's story, just so you know, he called them gopher-getters. He used his firecrackers and he put them in the pumpkins for all the grandkids to see, and he lit them and he blew those pumpkins to pieces. And then the next year, he had pumpkins growing all over the yard because he blew seeds everywhere, and he was so mad. I absolutely loved how much my dad loved my mom. Elisa and I always joke that our husbands are paying for it because they have such high expectations to live up to. I remember I was probably 12. The necklace that my mom is wearing today, he picked me up and took me to the mall one day and said, "Let's go get your mom a Christmas present." And we went to MacArthur Jewelers in the mall, and we spent hours trying to decide which, and he picked her out this beautiful necklace. There was another occasion. I lived in Provo, and we went to a jewelry store. He went to look at Rolexes, and I found the most beautiful diamond bracelet. When I told my dad, I said, "Man, that's my dream bracelet," kind of off the cuff because it's not something I can ever get. And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the most beautiful bracelet that I've ever seen." A couple months later, Christmas morning, my mom opened her present, and she pulled out that bracelet. And I looked at my dad because I knew how much it cost, and he just went, and I said, "Okay." I think we finally told her a few years later. I said, "Mom, you know how much that was, right?" And she said, "What?" My dad always called my mom Sweet Pea. He called her Princess. And when we were kids and we were giving her problems, he never said, "Don't talk to your mom like that, don't act like that." He looked us all dead in the eyes and he said, "You don't talk to my wife like that." And we knew he meant it too. A few years ago, I started making my own strawberry jam. My best friend Haley Wood and I make our jam together. And my dad loves jam, and he came up and I gave him a few jars of jam and sent him home. And then he told me that that's the best jam he's ever had, so I gave him some more for Father's Day. Time passed, and I had no idea he was out of jam. And then finally he called me on the phone and he said, "Hey, kiddo." And I said, "Hey, Dad." And he said, "I've got a problem." And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, I've gone to every grocery store. I've paid as much as $8 a bottle for jam. I've tried every bottle of jam that there ever is, and none of them are as good as yours. What do I have to do to get some more jam? And I said, I'll make you more jam. His last meal was my mom's cream of wheat with a big dollop of jam. My dad loved flying. We have heard that millions of times. One of my favorite memories is that there would be a Sunday morning, and I would get a phone call from my dad. It would wake me up, and he would say, I'm in the air, I'm on my way, pick me up at the Nephi airport, I'll buy you Denny's for breakfast. And so we'd go pick him up at the airport and have Denny's for breakfast, and then he'd fly back home. There were a few times that he came and picked my kids up to bring them down to visit. One time, my youngest was newly potty trained, and so they were about 2, 4, and 6 years old. They were little, and I was nervous to let my dad have to fly them in case they were naughty or whatever else. So I remember texting him the whole flight. They had to detour in Parowan for a potty break, and he got back up in the air, and so I texted him, how's everything going? And he said, oh man, I'm just limping along here on one engine, which would make most people really nervous. But I said, Dad, your plane's a single engine, right? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. He was always a tease. One of my favorite memories, my kids, they always laugh. They said that when they were little, Grandpa paid them $1 if they would let him tease them for the rest of their lives. And so, of course, as a kid, they all accepted the $1 because I was like gold. And now as teenagers, they all roll their eyes and they were like, oh my gosh, we never knew what that $1 would really cost. I'm going to end with my most treasured memory of my dad. One of the most special things he's ever said to me. When my oldest daughter, Kate, was a baby, we moved to St. George. My husband got an internship for the summer, so we were excited to move back home and to spend the summer. We moved in with my parents. We kept our apartment in Provo and just spent the summer with them. My dad and Mom were both so thrilled to have their first grandbaby at home with them. Labor Day weekend came, and we were moving back home. We had the car packed, loaded to the brim with luggage and diapers and wipes and bottles and a baby and all the things to move back home. And we were standing in the driveway of the house, saying our goodbyes to my parents. And my dad gave me a hug, and he said, you make sure to drive really safe. And I said, I will, Dad. And he said, no, you need to be really safe. You've got precious cargo in that car. I assumed he was talking about my beautiful little baby, and I said, I know, Dad. She is really special. And he shook his head, and he looked right at me, and he said, no, kid, you are to me what she is to you. And that was the first time that I really understood my relationship with my dad. I feel so grateful to have had as much time with my dad as we did. We got robbed by cancer, and he was taken from us far too early. I spent the last 3 weeks of his life at home with him, caring for him, and it was an honor. It was an honor to be able to care for him and to show him how much I loved him. I will miss hearing him say, hey, kiddo. I will miss him calling me little one. I will miss having someone to call that had the answer to everything. I'm going to end with this quote. Grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All of that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go. I will grieve my dad for the rest of my life. I'm supposed to check with my mom. She's good.
I decided to do this today. It was tough. I want my grandchildren to know that Grandma can do hard things. And it's important for me to let my family know how much I love their dad. Over the last few weeks, I'd run into people in town and they would tell me, I asked Dean what I could do for him, and the only thing that he would say to them was, take care of my wife. He's done everything he can to take care of me. So, I have so many things to be thankful for, and I'm thankful that you're all here sharing our celebration of his life. And look at this beautiful room filled with so many people, and I know there are people watching over the internet. I have so much to be grateful for. Dean and I and our little family are a team. Over the past 2 years, Dean's care has become our very most important game. Each of our children took part, either in Dean's care or the research in trying to determine what was at the fingertips of the new research. A simple call from them made Dean's day, brought a smile to his face. Out of necessity, our team grew to include extended family, colleagues, wonderful doctors and caregivers, and many who offered prayers in his behalf. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the prayers and kindness offered by Dean's Commission associates. As Dean's health declined, he was very ill and would occasionally have dizzy episodes and pass out. At special events, it was not uncommon to see Gil on one side, Victor on the other side, and Nicole right there with him, offering Dean support and aid. Sheriff Corey and his office watched over him at parades. Their goal was always to preserve Dean's safety and his dignity. For this reason, I'll be forever indebted to our amazing county friends. I will miss my best friend and my teammate, but I have to believe he's here with us, watching over us, watching while we're celebrating his life. He loves all of you. He loves you to the moon, to infinity and beyond, until the day after forever. That's what I tell my grandkids all the time. And I believe with all my heart we'll be together again. Thank you for coming today. Go ahead and finish up.
So lastly, we will hear a violin solo by my dad's primary care physician, Dr. Jason Swigert, and a closing prayer by Dad's brother, my Uncle Andy.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to have been able to gather today and to celebrate the life of our dear brother grandfather, father, husband, friend, and public servant, Dean Cox. We know that heaven has welcomed him and that he is comforted at this time. We're grateful for the memories that have been shared and the love that has been expressed today, and for those who have shown their support and love for our family. We pray that thou would bless us, that we can always keep our memories of Dean fresh in our minds, and we can reflect and recollect the good times and experiences that we had with Dean and the love that we shared with each other. We pray that thou would bless us this day, that as we mourn, that we can also rejoice in the plan of salvation and the blessings that are in store for all of us. Pray that thou would bless us, that we may travel safely this day to our homes and wherever we may gather. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
If I could please call the pallbearers forward and ask everyone to please rise and stand. From here, Dad will be escorted by the Washington County Sheriff's Honor Guard and transported on a fire engine by the Hurricane Valley and St. George Valley Fire Departments to Kolob Cemetery, where he will be laid to rest. You're welcome to join us at the graveyard service, and again, thank you for your love and support.